Welcome. Let's talk about advantages and disadvantages of microservices. So, not always microservices have advantages. There are also some disadvantages. Let's look at them. So, we know that the advantage is with microservices that we get the freedom to use different technologies, which means let's say payment can be built in Java, order service can be built in Python, and notification can be built in .NET or card service can be built in Node.js. So those kind of freedom we have with technology. But disadvantage is that it increases the troubleshooting challenges. Let's say something goes wrong in one component, then we don't know actually until and unless we trace back the whole request which is coming from the traffic. So until that time, we won't be knowing where is something going wrong. And the reason is that if it was a monolith application, we have the logging in that same application. We can log the information and then we can easily know this is the log file where the whole logging for this complete monolith application exists. But in case of microservices, there are different Spring Boot, so they have their own logging. And then there should be a mechanism to combine the logs of all the Spring Boot or microservices together, and then it has to be analyzed to find a problem. Hence, this is the disadvantage that the troubleshooting increases. Troubleshooting related techniques or the challenges has to be again built, and that increases the complexity. Then the next advantage that we have for microservices is each microservice focus on a single business capability. So that's very good because let's say if you are build if payment is one functionality which is built in one microservice and one team is responsible for it. Order is another one which is built by another team, another agile scrum team. So there can be different teams working together and there can be different product owners of their teams in normal agile scenarios, which means that if there is something not working in payments, the product owner or the organization knows whom to reach and ask for help or make responsible for. So this kind of things is very good because each single component is for responsible for one business functionality. Hence, it also helps in a efficient DevOps model of working. But due to components broken down into different applications, there is continuous remote calls happening. Let's say payment is calling the notification service to send SMS, and then order is calling the inventory service to check whether the product stock exists or not before placing the order. So all these calls that you see are actually HTTP calls, the network calls, and they increase the overall response time for the client. But if it was a monolith application, instead of making network calls, you could have called one class in another class by just calling their functions. Hence, the one of the disadvantages, it increases the overall response time by a few milliseconds. Let's go to the third advantage. So it supports unit deployment, which means as mentioned, it is one component, payment component. So the payment team can have its own continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline for its payment module, and it can be easily deployed independent of other modules via a separate release pipeline, and it can be brought to production faster. So any changes that has to be done can be quickly fixed and tested, verified, and deployed into production quickly. But then it also comes with an increased effort for configuration. If it was only one monolith application having 5 modules, then it was just one pipeline that you had to build. But now those 5 modules are broken down into 5 Spring Boot application. Hence, you have to have 5 continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines. So that's what it means by increased configuration. Now we have advantages allows frequent software releases because of independent of each other, so you can bring features to production faster. The reason being they are not interfering with each other. But here we have another problem. It's difficult to maintain transaction safety. What it means is, let's say there is a functionality that is more transaction oriented, that 1 2 3 should happen and then only it's considered as one transaction, otherwise it should all roll back. So those kind of scenarios are difficult to achieve in microservice architecture. Next is ensures security of each service. So in microservice, because each service is a separate microservice, hence they are very secured in terms of security capability. But because of this, now what happens is the data that we want to see. Let's say one service has updated the data in one database, and now we want to see a dependent related data for this particular service. Let's say a payment was done for a particular order ID, and now you want to check whether the payment was successful or not. Then you have to come to first to the order table to take the order ID. Then you go have to go to the payment table to see the particular order ID's payment status. So this basically increases extra overhead as well. Then we have multiple services are parallelly developed and deployed. As mentioned also earlier that multiple teams are working together and parallelly in their own comfort zone and bringing features to production in their own technologies and choice of pipeline, which means it's a big advantage that the overall productivity of that organization is increased. But now there's a disadvantage that let's say there's a piece of code which is reusable between all these components, but that cannot be reused because this is built in, let's say, Python, this is in .NET, this is in Node.js, and this is in Java. So they are not compatible with each other. Hence, it becomes difficult to share reusable code. Although there are different techniques that we can do that, but it's still not as easy as in case of a monolith application. So these were some of the advantages and disadvantages of microservices architecture. Thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next video.